Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of No Limits. My name is Scott Morganroth. Am I loud enough? I don't know. It depends who you talk to, who you listen to, but I have some good advice for you, a lot of folks out there. This is a broadcast where you're going to need a notepad and a pencil and a pad of paper because I have a lot of information, and I have Frank Chaput on the broadcast tonight. And Frank and I work together in the security business. And Frank, why don't you give the audience an overview of who you are and what you do and who you work for?
Absolutely. Well, my name's Frank Chaput, as Scott said, and I've been in the security business now for about 22 years. I'm a retired E8 in the United States Army. When I first got out, I didn't know what I was going to do, and I kind of fell into the security business. I fell in love with it, with helping people, being able to help people protect their families and their homes, and making a nice living doing it and feeling good about what I did at the end of the day, man. And I fell in love with that. I've been doing it now, like I said, for 22 years. The business has gotten nothing but better over the years in terms of the technology, the peace of mind that we can give people today. And I really love it. I've had a great time working with Scott throughout the years, and I'm really excited to be able to share with people tonight.
Now, I know, Frank, the one thing I like to talk about those individuals that have military backgrounds. Why don't you give an overview, a lot of the veterans out there, that you were a veteran and a military guy. That's always a very refreshing thing for a lot of those individuals out there.
Yep. Well, I spent 20 years in the Army, and spent 7 years in the Ranger Regiment. Spent, 5, 6, 7 years in the 82nd Airborne Division. So I was a paratrooper for 18 years and did a lot of cool things, had a great time, traveled the world, Africa, Europe, Asia, and just had a wonderful time with me and my family. And honestly, the 20 years was over before I knew it. I retired at the ripe young age of 37 years old. And Scott, when I retired at 37, I did not have a clue what I was going to do after that. It just snuck up on me, and I kind of fell into the security business because one of my soldiers who had gotten out prior to me had gotten involved in it. And he's like, "Hey, Sergeant C, you should check it out. It's really good business." And that's how I wound up in the security business.
It's amazing how everybody has a different path, how they ended up getting where they are. Just so a lot of you folks that are watching for the first time, I've been in the media for 40 years, but another lifetime ago, I was in the alarm business. In fact, that other lifetime ago when I began, it was in Phoenix, Arizona, and that was back in 2001. And at that particular point, that occurred when 9/11 took place. I never knew a lot about alarm systems. I knew at home shows that they were giving them away for free. I'm thinking, yeah, how is that even possible? Until I would only find out down the road that an old friend of mine had an alarm company back in Michigan. But I took it more seriously when I lived in the Phoenix, Arizona area. And, I had some of the most unconventional sales tactics on the planet. When I didn't even bother showing a keypad, all I did was take a clipboard and take a brochure, cut the darn thing up, and make everybody look at it, and had all my paperwork inside. And you know what? I've always believed that I don't care how you get your message across as long as you do it. But my alarm career began back in 2001 when you had those things called a perimeter system, which at that time, Frank, consisted of 3 contacts, motion detector, and a keypad, and they would substitute them for glass breaks because at that time, motion detectors were not able to handle pads. So why don't you talk about the evolution of that system back then, and then we'll talk about 9/11 later in the broadcast.
Oh, sure. Well, I got to tell you, that, in my 22 years in this business, our technology has increased and improved dramatically. And like you said, back then, a lot of times when you were beginning in this business, and myself as well, we didn't want to use a motion detector because any motion would set the motion detector off, whether it happened to be a moth flying across the room or your drapes blowing because the windows were open. That motion in itself would set the system off. So they got a really bad reputation. And then we came out with what we call the dual phase motion detector, which required now body heat and movement to set the system off. And then we had a more of a fail-safe type of product that it needed two different types of a technology, two different types of events to set it off, and it made us have a lot less false alarms, and it became a much more of a value to the customer. So we've improved on that since. We've added pet immunity, so now any animals that are smaller than 80 pounds won't set it off. We can tell the difference between the heat signature of an animal and a person. So that technology has continued to evolve and get better and better, giving the customer better protection and less fear of false alarms.
Prior to this situation, was it true, Frank, that alarm systems were considered a real big ticket item, before everything became more simplified? And if that's the case, I want you to go into more details about that.
Absolutely. I mean, when I first became a part of this business, yeah, it was not uncommon for someone to pay anywhere from $12 to $2,000 for their system, plus a monitoring service to support it. And that was more or less the known way to do it. If you're dealing with Westinghouse, Masada, a lot of these companies are out there back then, and they would sell you the system for anywhere from $12 to $2,000, and then support it with a monitoring service, probably $29, $30 a month on top of that. And then we went to a new model where we came. One of the companies in the industry that I'm sure you're familiar with, Scott, a company called Scott Alarm out of Jacksonville, Florida,
right,
came up with the product and said, hey, we're going to do a new program called Scott Free. We're going to offer the customer the alarm system at no cost. They just have to pay the monitoring service.
Right.
And that was a new paradigm in the industry, and everybody soon since adopted that afterward, because we couldn't compete with that any other way. And that's become the norm within the industry.
As we talk about certain things, Frank, during the broadcast, I've even noticed in many recent years, in the last 10 or 15 years, okay, that even call centers even sell alarm systems where you have, what we call boiler rooms here in South Florida. Then they have the technicians doing that. So, I think in some respects it kind of wrecked the industry a little bit, because it was taking a bad reputation with them, and again, we'll talk about that a little bit, because I think it's important for consumers to realize that if you run across a call center situation, stay the heck away from it. But talk about call centers a little bit, Frank.
Well, I got to tell you, Scott, man, selling you an alarm system over the phone is kind of like trying to give you a haircut on the telephone. Right. I can't do it. I can't cut your hair over the phone. And I can't sell you an alarm system and do it the proper way on the phone. If I don't come and walk through your house, ask you questions, talk to you about what are your concerns, how is the house laid out, how many doors, windows do you have, is it upstairs, downstairs, is it a split level, how do we do it, how many entry points are there? I've got to look at all of these things. I've got to know what are the concerns of the family members. Have you been in a house fire? Have you been burglarized? What is the level of protection that you expect? And I can't do all that over the phone. And anybody that does sell you a system over the phone or attempts to, they're simply not trying to do the right deal. They're just trying to make a buck and not really concerned about protecting that family adequately. And I'm never going to do that. I can't do it without going to your home, looking at it, being with you and your family, knowing what your concerns and cares are and what your home looks like. There's impossible to do it correctly. It's just not doable.
Yeah, when I was not able to go on the road for a period of time due to a back injury that led me to have surgery, I know I was able to do it effectively because I had seen a lot of homes. Therefore, I knew to ask the right questions. But for those managers that were coming up with these canned scripts and all that, and you had all these people called telemarketers, okay, out there doing it, it's one thing. So I was a detriment to those managers because I knew what I was talking about, but they didn't know what they were talking about, and they were worried I would take their job. But then again, I only did it for as long as I had to because physically I was a little limited. With that said, we'll move on to the next thing, and that's this. Frank, how far has it advanced through the years? We at one point or another we had the landlines where intruders could go ahead and cut the lines, and all of a sudden we got the cell backup. First of all, explain the landlines, and then we'll graduate to cell backup.
Well, when I first got into the business, we would take and do something called a phone line seizure and hook the incoming landline from the outside of your house where the little gray box. So the security system had priority on the line. So if somebody put the hook inside, it didn't matter because we had hooked the security system up first. And then as time went by, we came up with, like you said, the cellular backup. And after the cellular phones, the cellular backup became the primary means of communication. Well, the beautiful thing about that is now that the cellular network is the primary means of communication, it gave us the ability for the alarm to communicate to our cell phone and let us know what was truly happening in real time. So that alarm is sending us data throughout the day going, hey, this is what's happening in your home. This is what's happening. Hey, this is who's at your door. This is what's going on. Here's your camera. This is somebody walked in front of that. So now we're not wondering, well, is our home okay? We're being able to see what's really going on in our home, even though we're not there in real time. And the only reason we can do that is because of the cellular communication.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, once they had cellular communication, that was incredible. I remember when I was working in Arizona, I can tell you how many installations were delayed because of phone companies being behind installing new phone lines. I probably back then lost a lot of money because once you sold that system, you were hoping it would get in right away and the complications to get it up. Where that cooling off period, well, maybe I don't need it after all, maybe this and that, blah, 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 3-day cancellation. But when you get a cellular backup, all of a sudden you get that bad boy up and running and you're in business. So you talk about just the evolution in itself going from the landline, got to wait forever to get it installed, all the way to having cellular backup. And I'll probably bet that decreased a lot of your cancellations, so to speak, in the area, knowing that you had that technology available to you.
Absolutely. I mean, we didn't have to worry about somebody getting a landline. And ultimately, now it's become a rarity for someone to get a landline. So it just doesn't happen very often anymore. And we don't need it to, thank goodness. So people have found that, hey, wait a minute, the cellular network is faster, it's more direct, and we don't have to worry about somebody cutting the phone line. You can't disable the system. And one of the cool things about the whole cellular technology is when you try to get into the house, if you were to try to disable the system because it is on the cellular network, by the time you can reach the panel, it has already signaled a trouble to the monitoring center. It's already alerted them before you ever reach it. If you reach there and you try to rip it off the wall and scramble it or stomp it, it doesn't matter because the second when you open the door, that cellular communicator sent the signal. And it's already done before you ever reach that. And of course, that was not the case with the landline.
So tell our consumers out there, Frank, what should the average response time be from the moment that the monitoring station to actually getting there? Some people complain it's too late. All of a sudden they've ransacked my place, and then what? I mean, there has to be a certain time for which you catch these guys red-handed.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's going to depend on what product that you searched and you bought. So, obviously, when you have a cellular communicator, that's the fastest communication possible because it doesn't have to wait on a dial tone. It doesn't have to dial out all of that stuff. It's a direct connection. And so that's the fastest. So I know with Brinks Home Security, their average response time nationwide is less than 20 seconds. So, and every account that we do at Power Home is all two-way voice. That means within 20 seconds of that system going into an alarm state, there's a live operator talking to you, They're coming in through an open channel. We're opening that channel to the system. You don't have to get to a telephone or a cell phone or any of that, Scott. We're speaking to you directly through that alarm system panel and saying, hey, this is the monitoring system. What's your emergency?
So by the time they get to the, you hear somebody to the home, give me a rough idea when the authorities should be out there. I know a lot of that depends on whether they're in remote areas. So I understand that that's a consideration here.
Yeah. I mean, that's really difficult to say because we don't know if there's a police officer that's a block away or a mile away or 10 miles away. So, but what we can tell you is that, how quickly can we alert them? I would say within a minute of the alert coming into us, that we ascertain that there's really truly a need by talking to the victim, the homeowner, whatever, and making sure that it is truly them that's talking to us by verification of a password. Then we can go ahead and determine, hey, what's the need? Is it police? Is it fire? Is it medical? And making sure we dispatch the proper thing. And the really appropriate time for that entire process to happen is less than a minute.
Okay. All right, let's talk about the keypad, touchpads, however you want to talk about it. I know a lot of them. I remember when I was in the business, you had those silent codes where you hit a bogus code in there. That way, if these guys put you at, in a very uncomfortable situation, have a lot of these burglars caught on to the fact that you have a bogus code in there, or is it something that's still commonly used to, get people out there and, be a little deceptive there?
Well, we set ourselves up for failure initially because everybody in the industry decided that it was a good idea to use the same code.
Okay.
So we would go right down the center of the keypad, 2580, and everybody used exactly the same code. It didn't matter what company you were working for, where it was. So eventually it became common knowledge. Everybody used the same thing. And so then it was worthless, So the Security Industry Association in the United States got together and they said, we need to have a dress code system, but it can't be the same thing for everybody. It just doesn't make sense. So they decided, they voted on some different things, and they came up with something we call a +1 system. So typically whenever a customer decides, hey, this is my PIN number, we're going to add another number into that PIN number. I'm not going to explain specifically how we do it, but we add another PIN number, a number into there that somebody wouldn't be able to know, and it does deactivate the system, but it also sends a duress code. And it's something that if you were standing right next to me and I'm under duress, you would have no idea that I just entered that code. It'll just look like I disarmed the system, and I don't want to tell you exactly how it works because, who knows going to see this.
Right.
But there is a process for that to happen, and we can instruct the customer how that's going to happen in the event that they ever have to disarm that system under duress, how they can alert somebody that they need help.
Well, I think the important part of that question, I think you understand it, is how far have the duress codes come from where they once were? That's the whole thing that I want everybody to take out of this broadcast, is how far have we come with those particular codes then to now? And that's what people have to know, that when you're dealing with state-of-the-art technology, okay, you realize, because there are a lot of things as we approach equipment right now, Frank, that what you have now versus was back then, it's a totally different animal, for sure. And people have to understand the relevance and legitimacy of these duress codes so that, I don't care if you're a burglar, there's two different kinds of burglars, a smart one and a stupid one. And even the smart ones can be thrown off base a little bit because obviously it's a security business job to think ahead of these guys. That's how you keep people safe.
Absolutely.
So with that said, the next segue, let's talk about some of the key pieces of equipment that consumers should invest to. I'll break them down, okay, one by one. Let's talk about the doorbell camera.
Man, I got to tell you, Scott, that is the most requested piece of additional equipment that we have, and just an awesome, awesome device. And that allows the customer, say yourself, no matter where you're at, to know who that is at your door. and not only know that, but to be able to correspond with them, and they don't know whether you're in the home or not. You could be across town at Starbucks, somebody ring your doorbell, or even approach the door without ringing it, and it alerts you, right? It sends a photo of them, live streaming photo to your phone, and you can converse with them, and they don't know if you're in the home or you're across town. They have no idea where you're at. And so there's a great deterrent value to that. All of a sudden, somebody comes talking out of that thing, and they're like, oh, crap, somebody's home. Maybe I shouldn't steal this package off their porch. They know I'm here, So it's invaluable in terms of porch pirates. I'm telling you, it shuts down on that so much, but it's really great because a lot of times if you've got a single mother that's at home, a stay-at-home mom, that kind of thing, it allows her to be able to tell who's at the door without putting herself in the danger or going opening the door and exposing herself to a threat,
So let's go to the outdoor camera. You talked about that being a very popular piece of equipment.
Yep. Second most popular item, and people want multiples of those because they like to look and see all the way around the perimeter of their home. And the outdoor camera is infrared, so it can see at night. It's absolutely incredible. I mean, you're talking about high definition 1080 camera with infrared capability that can see at night. And we normally typically place those on the eaves of the home. And you might put one on each corner, and you can see the driveway, you can see the sides of the house, what's going on in the backyard. And it really gives people a peace of mind to be able to see that stuff. And, these things are set up in such a way that if they detect motion by some movement through there, it alerts your cell phone, and you can pull that up and you can see what's going on there. And you say, hey, is that somebody in my backyard? Do I need to dispatch? Or it's just a deer, So it gives you that peace of mind and know that you know what's going on around your property and your home. And it's just another level of physical security that gives you that peace of mind to make you feel like you've done everything you can to keep your family safe.
Okay, let's go to the automated door lock.
That thing is a really cool device. I don't think as many people invest in that as should. It's a really, especially if you've got school-age children, it's an invaluable tool. Myself, I've got 6 kids, and I can tell you that they lose their key to the house. I'm telling you, every one of them has, and we have one of those on our back door. And so they always know if they lose their key to the house, they can come around. They have their own PIN number. They can put it into the key, key it right into the lock, opens the door, boom. If I had a friend or family member that showed up unexpectedly at the house and I'm not there, and my wife and I went out shopping or whatever, and they call, hey, Frank, man, I just decided to drop in on you, but you're not home. I could simply pick up my phone and say, hey, okay, Scott. Give me 1 second. Boop, 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 boop. I push the number in here, unlock the door. Go ahead and go in. Make yourself at home. We'll be back in about 30 minutes, So it gives me that flexibility that I can do that. If I've got a repairman coming to do something in my home, I don't need to leave a key hidden under a rock where everybody knows to look or under the mat, I can simply, when he arrives, he can call me, let me know. I can unlock the door remotely from my phone, let him in. When he's ready to leave, he just tells me, and I can secure the door right from my phone, man. And one of the big things that we do now is integrate Alexa into the system. So at night when I'm laying in bed and I'm getting ready to go to sleep, I can tell Alexa, lock the front door. Boom, it's done. I don't have to worry about it, man. It's a really, really convenient piece of technology. I can't tell you enough how much that thing will simplify your life.
All right, let's go on to thermostats. I have a few other things that have come to mind that we're going to incorporate into the broadcast as well, but we won't do so until we hit thermostats. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I got to tell you, the thing about the thermostat is it's the one piece of equipment. Obviously, it's not a security device. It's a smart home device, but it's the one piece of equipment that we sell that actually will put money back into your family's budget. And the reason is because it learns your patterns. It learns that, hey, nobody's here from 9 o'clock to 3:30 every day. So I'm not going to keep it at 72. We're going to move it up to 76. So we're not using as much energy during that time. And, everybody comes home about 4 o'clock. So at 3:30, we're going to start to cool it back off. And what it does is it allows you to use less energy during that period of time, and it learns your family's patterns. As it learns them, it starts to save you more and more money. So a typical family that installs one of those thermostats is going to save typically about 20% off of their energy bill a month. And that's the one device that we have that's actually going to put money right back into your pocket that you were already spending.
Okay, now let's talk about entry points. I know it's pretty obvious that in many instances that the most common entry points is usually through the back doors or the doors. Is that correct? I can't imagine much of that has ever changed, has it?
No, it hasn't.
Right.
It's
Or what they
usually
are.
the front door or the back door.
Right.
Yep.
And of course, now with that said, okay, let's talk about gated communities. A lot of people have that preconception that if I'm in a gated community, I don't even need this. After all, now unless you're in South Florida and you can't get through them and you can't go market there because they won't let you in. Not that I'm too old to go ahead and climb the fence and go ahead and get fined for getting back there. But talk about gated communities. I think gated communities to me are every bit as vulnerable as non-gated communities.
Well, and I believe you're absolutely correct. I guess it was 3 or 4 years ago now. I was training some new guys in the Orlando market, and we happened upon a gated community. And what we found out here in Orlando is during the afternoon when the school buses are running, all the gated communities open the gates so that the school buses can come in and drop the kids off.
Right.
So about 2:30 to 4 o'clock, all the gates were flung wide open. So as we go into this neighborhood, it's a gated community, but the gate's wide open. We go in, and the first house that we go to on the right when we enter, there's 2 squad cars there. There's a sheriff's car and an Orange County police officer car. And we go up and talk to them. They have 3 little girls. The wife was a Orlando PD. The husband was the sheriff. And they live in the gated community, and they purchased a system. And they've got 2 squad cars. Now, what burglar is going to go break into a house with 2 squad cars sitting in the front drive? Probably no one. But they can't be there all the time, and they know the dangers that are out there. And they've got 3 little girls to worry about. And so if these 2 police officers thought that live in a gated community thought it was important enough to invest in a system for their family, what does that tell you? I think that sets a paradigm. So everybody says, hey, well, I live in a gated community. Well, so does the sheriff and the police officer, but they got one.
Wow,
so pretty cool. If they think it's important, it ought to be important to you as well.
Well, let me tell you, when I broke back into the industry in 2001, I found that police officers were very, very receptive to the idea. And I worked out in the desert, by the way, Phoenix, Arizona, where, whether you had gated communities or not, police officers do have to live someplace, okay? And they were definitely open to the idea. So when we talk about how your industry competes with the Home Depots, because let's not kid yourself. Nowadays, okay, there are alarms that can go as low as $10, and they can go as high as over $100, depending on what you want to get. If you are a consumer out there right now and comparing the do-it-yourself route, because nowadays people will go out there and invest on their own, get it installed. If you had to go ahead and advise people, and I know you're in the industry, so I get that, okay, comparing with the Home Depots, the Lowe's, as well as the other little guys, what would be the difference between what you do versus what a lot of folks are going to do that I want to get a regular system, I can put it together a la carte, you know what I mean, and then get it monitored, because a lot of people tend to be thrown off a little bit by that, and I want you to give clarity why they should go ahead do business with you versus what's out there, because a lot of people are definitely, I don't know if they're misled by it, but they need to be more informed.
Well, I would definitely say they're misled by it, and one of the things is, that I won't mention any companies' names, but there's companies out there that have no monitoring contract. They have no liability because they send you a box of stuff and ask you to become the alarm technician. Here, Scott, you install it. So if it's screwed up, it's your fault, not mine.
Right.
And because of that, I take no liability. And what I'm going to do is offer you some low cost monitoring. But on the other hand, I'm going to charge you a bunch of money up front for that equipment.
Right.
And oftentimes, $400, $500, $600 for that equipment up front and monitoring service on top of that. And when you really sit down and figure it out, people don't understand. If you put the pen to paper and you figure out what the numbers are that are involved in a do-it-yourself system,
right,
you're paying just as much as you would for a professionally installed system, but you're not getting the same thing because we're giving you UL 5 diamond rated monitoring station. We're giving you service for the lifetime of that system. As long as you're being monitored, you do not have to fix or repair it. You simply pick up the phone and call, and we dispatch a trained alarm technician that's NTS certified, National Training Center certified to be able to be an alarm technician that knows what they're doing, to come out there and repair your system for you at no expense to you. Not do it yourself, not Scott, hey, well, we'll send you another piece in the mail and see if that fixes it. That's not how we work, So it's a big thing. And a lot of people think they have the perception, oh, I'm saving money, but in the end, they're ultimately not. And the worst part is that they have an illusion of being protected when they're really not. Because these simple systems, some of these DIY systems, if you go and YouTube it, there's videos on there, and you can simply disable those systems in a matter of 10 seconds before it ever goes off by simply just removing the battery.
Right.
Disabled, it's not helping you, not calling for help, can't do nothing. And how much is it worth to you now?
Well, what I've learned over the years, I know you've certainly trained me a few lessons over the years. I don't care what business you're in. There are no shortcuts. And if you think there are, don't hold your breath. I don't believe in it. But that doesn't mean that the average consumer doesn't think that way, because let's face the reality, Home Depot and Lowe's are very credible places. And if you go in there to get a system from there, who knows what kind of advice you're going to get from them. So they certainly have a good reputation in terms of, viability is concerned. I do know that over the years, though, there have been a lot of unethical alarm companies that have gone out of business. And so, they have stability. Again, I don't mind mentioning names. ADT is certainly a quality company, Brinks, and I'm sure there's a lot of other ones, and I don't want to get into the name game either. But, you have reputation, and you have the dealer approach versus corporate. So do you find at times that there's any advantage of dealing with a corporate entity versus a dealer's system?
Well, I would fare to go toward the dealer side, because typically in a dealer relationship, they have a lot more flexibility in what they can conduct with the customer, the business that they can do. And having been associated previously a long time ago with ADT dealer program and competing against ADT corporate, there was never a time when we didn't win a deal over ADT corporate, because we just had much more flexibility than they did. And but it was very confusing to the consumer to meet with a person from corporate and then here, wait a minute, I'm ADT as well, and come in and give them a better deal, and they just like, well, why would you do that? And that's just the way ADT is set up. But I don't think that's the best situation, but definitely is a good situation. So ADT has their little situations, and more than anything, dealers just have a lot more flexibility when they're dealing with a customer. They have more wiggle room, more ability to wheel and deal, and to give you a better deal.
Now, one of the more common trends these days, Frank, is not only do you deal with the ADTs, but you also have the triple play combination with Comcast and companies along those lines. If you had to go out there and compare the average situation versus the triple plays, because a lot of people like to have it all in one bill, do you find that that's tough to compete with at times? in your industry? Because I know for me, in some cases, I wouldn't mind going with that triple play combination, knowing it's a lot easier to bundle it up versus it is to pay a separate bill. Again, I'm just talking about in general terms, whether it's for the average consumer. I know how I am. I'm biased toward the other way, but there's a lot of people that aren't that way at all.
Well, Scott, I'll tell you this. If your lights are flickering on and off, do you call the plumber?
Right.
No, you call an electrician, right?
Right.
So if I'm having a security issue, I'm not calling the cable company because that's not what they do. They do media, they do TV, they do internet. And when they do security, it's an afterthought. They're not professionals at it by any stretch of the imagination. As we've all seen, we saw AT&T came out with their Digital Life product and plastered that garbage that they imported from China all over the place and ultimately could not support it. It didn't work, and they had to back out of that business altogether. And no alarm company in its right mind would touch any of those accounts because they had brought and created their own cheap equipment from China, and nobody would support it.
Right.
Everybody's like, nope. Well, they tried to sell it to numerous companies, and they wouldn't take it. And the reason is AT&T's a phone company. That's what they do. They're not a security company, and it all bit them in the behind ultimately, and they totally got out of that. And you see the same thing happen with Time Warner and some of these other companies. They delved in there and thought, oh, well, we can get some more reoccurring monthly revenue, not realizing what they needed to do and the liability that was involved in the security side of the house. And, we don't do cable. We don't do phones.
Right.
We do security. We do security and home automation, and that's all we do. And we do it better than anyone else. And, we don't call the plumber for an electrical problem, and we don't call the electrician for a plumbing problem. So don't call the cable company when you want somebody to protect your family. That's what I'm going to tell you.
Well, I'll tell you one thing I should point out, and we talked about the dealer program versus corporate. In the end, you know what? That account ultimately winds up with corporate. They have to end up, I know that the dealers have it for a while, and then after a while it winds up in corporate saying the only difference is the consumer gets more equipment because, as you alluded to before, the dealers program does have a lot more latitude in terms of providing additional equipment. With that said, okay, I'm sure that there's a part of our audience, Frank, that are renters, okay? Do you have rental programs as well? Because I know a lot of times when you enter into a security agreement, you're dealing with a 2 or 3 year agreement where renters, many of them don't stay in one place for about a year. So why don't you talk about agreements first part of the equation, how they automatically transfer. Then the second part of the equation is I want you to go into the rental aspect of this.
Well, we understand that people have different circumstances. And some people own a home, some people lease an apartment, and there's a lot of different options out there for people today. And we don't feel like because you've elected to rent a nice apartment somewhere that you no longer qualify for a security system to protect your family any more than the homeowner does. So we have a program for everyone. And that's really what it's all about. We provide an ability to secure your home, whether it be an apartment, a home, a mobile home, a townhouse, a condo, whatever it is, to anyone. And so renters are just as viable of a customer group to us as anyone else. And we know that they have families and they want to protect them. So we provide them with the ability to do that. So there's no one currently that in any demographic that we don't have the ability to protect, whether the renter, homeowner, or anything else. We have a system for them. And we believe that they deserve to be protected, and we're absolutely going to provide them with an alternative to do that.
Now, as far as the agreement length, I know in many instances you're talking about a standard 24 to 36 month situation. Although for a lot of people out there, you have to be careful what you sign because you don't know if some of these are going to carry over without you knowing about it. And nowadays, during a very skeptical, consumer-oriented thing where read before what you sign, why don't you get some clarification about the terms of these agreements? Because let's not kid yourself. The average individual should know that, when you're in there for the first 2 or 3 years, you're literally paying for the equipment but only in the course of installments. But yet, you know what? It's better than paying for it out of your pocket as well.
Yeah. Well, Scott, I'm going to tell you, man, that is really something that separates Power Home Technology from a lot of the companies out there. Is we don't go and tell the customer everything's free, free, free. We tell them this is what the equipment costs and this is what the monitoring costs, and we give them a low monitoring rate that's locked in for life. It's $19.99 a month, and it's guaranteed to never go up. It's locked in for life. If they will sign a 60-month monitoring agreement with us, that'll be locked in for them as long as their system is monitored. $19.99 a month, and then we do finance the equipment separately. And when that equipment is paid for, it just goes away. Unlike many companies where they for $74.99, it never goes away. It's perpetual. So 7 years, 8 years, 9 years down the road, they're still paying that high monitoring rate, knowing that equipment has long since been paid for. And so rather than come at you and tell the customer, oh, everything's free, 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 we don't lie to them like that. We're honest with them. The equipment costs this, the monitoring costs this. We put it together. When the equipment's done, this is all you're going to pay. We lock it in for life. And if Scott, if you came to me and you said, Frank, I really like everything. I like the package. I want the equipment, but I really just don't feel like I can sign a 60-month agreement, then we have an option for a 36-month agreement too, right? It's just a little bit more. And if you said to me, you said, Frank, well, I love everything about what we're doing here, but man, I really don't want to sign a long-term agreement. I've got a month-to-month agreement that I can do for you, and it's still a very low price, only $29.99 a month, and there's no contract whatsoever. So we have a situation for every consumer, and that's what it's all about. It's not a one-size-fits-all world out there, right. And we want to make sure at Power Home that we have a solution that's going to fit everybody's needs and budget.
But for your price points, what are they actually getting for that?
Well, it just really depends on what the package is that they choose. So we do a lot of home automation, and all of our home automation systems have an integrated Amazon Alexa and a Dot, because we set all of our home automation systems up to be voice activated. So you walk in the door, if you have a door lock and you walk in, you can say, Alexa, lock the front door. If you have lighting, we can tell you, Alexa, turn on the kitchen light. Alexa, I'm getting ready to go to bed. Alexa, close the garage door. So we integrate all of that stuff so it's voice activated, and that's kind of the industry standard now. That's where the business is going, to not only be automated in terms of the geofencing, but also to be automated in the terms of voice activation. Right. Alexa, arm the system in a way. So I can tell every command that system can do, I can tell it to do verbally. And that's where we're really going. And we've already started to integrate that into every package that we sell.
Very impressive. All right, let's go to the typical walk around. I know when I was in the business, as we alluded to at the top of the broadcast, Frank, you walk around the home, get to know the customer for sure. And then you go ahead and look at all the windows and doors. One things I used to like to do is I enjoyed putting a motion detector in the corner because you had a wide open space to protect. And of course, the windows are what they are. You had to be strategically smart in terms of where you place the equipment. I was always told this is just advice, not the norm. You leave that to the discretion of the technician for sure. And people will take whatever they want. So let's talk about the typical walk around when I was doing it, and then we'll carry it over to the modified walk around, and you know where I'm going with this.
Absolutely.
Explain how that works, typical walk around.
Yeah, so I mean, you've heard it called different things, bad guy walk around, whatever. We want to walk through with the customer, and what are we trying to ascertain is, what are the perceived weaknesses from the customer? What are areas that are really key to them? For example, if it's a child's bedroom, they definitely want to protect the windows if they face the rear of the rear of the home, where someone might be able to get to those windows without being seen. Well, if it's my child, I'm going to want to protect those windows. We all remember the story of Elizabeth Smart being taken out of her bedroom window in California.
Right.
And that unfortunately was not an isolated case. So as we walk through, we determine, this is Billy's room, this is Susie's room. What are we concerned about here? Do we want to protect these particular windows or in place? We look at how the house is laid out. How can we get the best coverage out of the least amount of equipment and make sure that the family is safe? And the one thing that we always want to ask the customer is, and I'm sure you've done this, is I definitely have done it, is if I lock my keys out of the house or lock them in the house, we always know that there's one particular vulnerable place that we might be able to break back into our own home. And in the back of our mind, we know that's a vulnerability because we know we've gotten in the house there before. We've been able to be, we used to have a window on our deck that you could shake it enough, the little things would come along, you could get in there. And every homeowner knows that place. And we want to make sure that we identify with them because in the back of their mind, that is a vulnerability. We want to definitely make sure that we address that during the walk around so they know that we've absolutely secured their home to the level that they need it done. And it's really super important. So it's hard to do the job properly without being able to walk through the home, ask them the questions, know who lives where, what the different parts of the house are. It's kind of like I said before, trying to give you a haircut over the phone. It's just pretty much impossible, and it's a critical part of the whole process,
I think people should be very well aware that if you're a burglar, the first place you're going to go to is a medicine cabinet because you have a lot of those types of individuals out there. I don't care whether you're in 2020 or 1920. They're going to the medicine cabinet. They're going to the safe, just to name a couple of little isolated places where they think that they can put a little extra in their pocket or if they have a habit that they can't quite kick. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about the modified walk around, I'm really kind of going COVID-19 a little bit here. Now, obviously, you guys are faced with a different set of challenges. It's not so safe, the average individual doesn't really want to let anybody through the door, and so this is a combination question. Let's talk about the modified walk around, and then I'm going to follow it up with the COVID-19 effect.
Well, I mean, we have to depend a lot more on the customer to help us understand the layout of the home and everything if they don't feel comfortable letting someone in. Now, all of our guys go to the door wearing a mask. We all wear a mask for protection. We get in there, and as you can see, I have mine right here. We go to the door. We have our mask on. We do our thing. We go to the door. So the customer feels like, hey, these people are taking steps to make sure that we're safe and they're safe. And then, we'll keep it on as we go through the home. If they feel comfortable letting us in, if they don't, then, we'll depend on them to kind of verbally help us decide what goes where, because they know the layout of the home. And so that's very important. But we certainly don't want to go into any home where people feel like we might be a threat or we might be contaminating them or anything like that, because I was with a elderly gentleman today and he was very concerned about that. So it's important for us to make people feel at ease and know that we're safeguarding them as well as us. And so there are ways for us to do this without actually going through there. And we've used technology a great deal during this time to be able to do just like you and I are doing right now and do a Zoom meeting.
Right.
And the beautiful thing about Zoom is we actually have the customer take their laptop and walk through the house as we're talking to them so we can see how the house is laid out and they can see Billy's room and Cindy's room and we know what's going on. And they become our eyes and ears as they walk through and show us how everything's laid out. So there's other ways for us to do it by the use of technology. Still allows us to do it in a proper way without physically having to be there because they're our eyes and ears. So technology has really helped us immensely. We were able to continue to keep families protected. and to be able to see what we need to see to do it the proper way.
So when we talk about the COVID-19 effect, it's safe to say that a lot of your representatives go there with masks, gloves, and are very sanitized. But do you ever run across situations where, your guys could very well get the COVID-19 virus? I mean, nowadays, I would think being an in-home sales representative, that they're just as apprehensive about going in as the consumer is about letting them in. I mean, there's no question during COVID-19, nothing that we ever had to deal with before. Then again, a pandemic has only happened once every 100 years anyways. But there has to be a tremendous amount of apprehension on both sides nowadays.
Well, honestly, in dealing with our sales force and our representatives in the field, we haven't had a lot of concern from our guys, but more concern about, we don't want to bring it or transmit it to someone else unknowingly, because as we've all found out, that there's a lot of people out there that are asymptomatic that may carry it and spread it to other people. I have no symptoms whatsoever. So I could very well have it, not know it, and bring it to you. And so it's very important for us to do all the things that we can. And if a customer, we knock on the door and they don't feel comfortable and they wave us off, we simply keep moving, and that's what we do, so it's not, hey, you know what? They don't feel comfortable doing this. So we have a flyer that we leave on the door, Scott, and it tells them all the different ways that we can do it without actually physically encountering them. And they can give us a call. Our number's on there. We can do it by Zoom, Skype, Google Hangouts, all of these different ways where we can actually see what's going on in the home. They can walk through it with us. We also do it by FaceTime on an iPhone, and they can walk through and show us what's happening in the house. What are we trying to do? How's it laid out? And we can put the system together for them without physically having me there, using them as our eyes and ears and letting us see what's going on.
Well, you can't take away the human element. At some point or another, if they decide to do this, you're going to send a technician out there. How are you going to warranty it to begin with? But it's getting through the preliminaries, the paperwork that's going to be done nowadays electronically. I think I should point out to a lot of our consumers out there that, we're talking about the burglary aspect, but when I first got into business, okay, and every person that's been involved in the security industry probably has about 10, 15 million books that they haven't written and has great stories to tell. I love the one about the old dogs here. My dog will protect me. Yeah, okay, but the only problem is unless you got Lassie, okay, then Lassie's not going to go out there and consider herself like a German Shepherd to, that will cause a little uninflicting pain. I've never seen Lassie's paws ever hit the top of a keypad to let you in there either. But the one thing that I've always told people is, you know what? I don't care how much you think your neighbors are watching over you. And I have some pretty good neighbors, knock on wood. The reality of the situation is these security systems are designed to save lives in the event of a 911 situation as well. We're not talking about we're talking about fire, we're talking about medical as well as the burglary aspect of things, which leads me to my next point, okay? How can you monitor older members of your family without being there? I know senior citizens is a big thing nowadays, isn't it? As it always has been. And my grandmother, believe it or not, many years ago in West Bloomfield, Michigan, lived independently because she had a security system and she did rent it. Now, back then, she paid the monitoring a year in advance and they didn't mind doing it. Nowadays, I think things are a bit more flexible. But let's not kid yourself. We cannot forget about senior citizens.
No, absolutely. And my mom lives in Memphis, Tennessee. I live in Orlando, Florida, and obviously that's quite a ways. And I want to make sure that she's safe. So I got her a system. And there's a couple of factors, a couple of things that we have in there that help me to make sure she's safe. And we have a couple of cameras in her home, in the interior of her home, that we can view. And we also have something called a lack of activity monitor. So one of the things that we did is we placed a contact, and this is what we call a non-reporting contact. So it's not going to make the alarm go off, but it's on the bathroom door, right? So typically she's going to go to the bathroom several times throughout the day, every couple of hours or so, right? And so that door opens and closes, and everything's fine. Nothing happens. But say it goes for a 6 hour period and it doesn't open or close. It sends me a text message. It lets me know, hey, wait a minute, that thing has an open or close in 6 hours. Lack of activity monitoring. So now what? Well, now it's not going to make the alarm go off, but it makes me call up mom and say, Mom, are you okay? Is everything all right?
Right.
Because I know that in a 6 hour period, typically she's going to go to the restroom at least once.
Right.
And so it allows us to monitor them, without having to, encroach upon their freedoms, give them that flexibility, but still have some kind of peace of mind and know that, hey, wait a minute, there's some technology there that's going to alert me if there's a perception of a problem. And that's exactly what we use. Lack of activity monitoring is invaluable.
I know a lot of folks out there often look at the ways to protect senior citizens through Life Alert. I know that's been a company that's been around for a while. They certainly have built their niche in the senior market, and there's probably a lot of other ones out there. But, can you really trust an organization like that? And I'm not knocking Life Alert. I'm just talking an organization like that. I preface my words very carefully, knowing full well that they're probably using older equipment. Whereas nowadays we're talking state of the art type of technology where you're further ahead. I want to make sure I preface what I'm saying here for the sake of clarification.
Well, what we find is that a lot of people are paying a really high amount for Life Alert. As much as they could have a complete security system with fire protection, medical protection, and burglary protection, and still save money. And I had a customer recently that we took care of their mom because she had a Life Alert and she was paying $65 a month just for that product. She's on oxygen. She lived alone. And so she's got the threat of fire there in her house with bottles of oxygen. And yet she had no kind of burglary protection, no kind of fire protection. And we were able to give her all those different protections in her home as well as the medical alert and save her money.
Right.
And so, yeah, our product absolutely does all of that. And what you'll find if you do a little shopping around is that you can actually get a comprehensive security package that does police, fire, ambulance, and medical all at once, usually at a fraction of the cost of Life Alert.
Yeah, I've often known that company, and along with other ones, they're just, to me, very one-dimensional is what they are, versus what you have, which is definitely multifaceted. And I think that's the thing that a lot of our consumers should make note. By the way, folks, you're listening and watching to No Limits. My name is Scott Morgan, Rock Motor City, Manmouth. Glad to be joined by Frank Chaput, who works over at Power Home Technologies. Frank is always glad to have him. We have a little more work to do because we want to make sure that everybody out there gets everything they need to know about this. With that said, let's transition over to smart home technology. Why don't you give everybody a general overview of what that's about?
Well, it's kind of the evolution of the security product. So we, as you know, and I know, when we first started out, we were using some very rudimentary hardwired systems that were hooked up to a landline phone, and they really were only either off or on. There weren't a lot of things that it could do other than alert you if somebody opened a door or window. And but over the years, as technology has evolved, we've incorporated many, many, many more things. So now we have the ability to do energy saving features such as thermostats, LED light bulbs that we can control remotely. So that's an energy conservation features. We've got different kinds of safety features, as well as convenience, as the front door locks, the automated door locks that we can control once again remotely with an app on our phone. We also have the ability to control our garage door opening and closing. So there's a lot of different factors that we can build into this, not even to mention all the different types of cameras that we can integrate into the system that you can view all remotely. So the cool thing is with our all home automation product, we incorporate all of that into the Alexa system from Amazon, and we can do everything by voice control now. So I can tell the system to turn on, the arm itself to turn on the lights, close the garage door, lock the front door, turn up the thermostat. All of these things just simply by telling Alexa I wanted to do it. And so that's the next level of home automation, to be able to, and back in the day, we used to watch Captain Kirk walk onto the bridge and say, "Computer, do this." And they used to do it. And now we're living that. I mean, our system can literally do that for you. You can walk into your family room and say, "Computer, turn off the kitchen light," and it'll do it. "Computer, lock the back door," it'll do it. Alexa's the computer. So we just simply tell Alexa, "Close the garage door." Alexa, turn on the front porch light. Alexa, turn down the thermostat. And we've got all of these different parts of the system integrated now, where we can do that voice control. And that's where the industry is going, to total voice control. And that's what the home automation, the home smart home technology, as you hear it called, is going to. That's what we're doing right now.
I want to keep things basic for a moment, okay? I want you to explain the difference between a hardwired system and a wireless system.
Well, hardwired system, I don't even know anybody that does that anymore, honestly. But when I did first start in the system, in the security industry, that was the norm. We were doing Vista 9s, Demco's Vista 9s, where we physically had to run a wire from our master control panel, big metal box that we'd hide in the closet somewhere, and we'd run a wire either through the attic or under the house, all the way to every device in the house, wherever it was. And we would plug it into an outlet somewhere, and then we would run another wire outside the house to the little gray box where your phone signal came in, and wire it in there. And that was all wired, and we called it hardwired because it was all wired in. So the problem was that your local friendly burglar could walk by with a pair of little clippers and clip one of those wires and disable the whole thing. And that was truly a problem. So after a while, burglars aren't all necessarily dumb. They begin to find the weaknesses and they go, "Hey, there's a wire right here on the outside of the house that feeds that whole system. And if you clip that, it can no longer communicate with anyone. It's just a noisemaker at that point." And so we began to go wireless to figure out ways that we could keep the bad guy from being able to get to the system. And we created something that you very well know, called smash and crash technology. Right. So we put a new wireless keypad inside the house, and we programmed it so if they opened a door or a window, it would send a signal to our monitoring station and let them know. If it doesn't followed up with an abort signal an appropriate amount of time, that signal got converted to a burglary alarm, and there was a dispatch that would happen. So whether you have in fact snatched that thing off the wall and smashed it to smithereens or not, by then it didn't matter, because the moment you opened that opening door, window, whatever it was, it told on you, and after 30 seconds, that was dispatched. There's cops are going to be waiting for you on the front porch. And wireless technology allows us to do that. I mean, now everybody obviously is used to, we carry wireless technology everywhere we go. And now our system's able to communicate to our monitoring center like that. So you can't disable it from outside the house anyway.
All right, when I got into business, we're going to talk about the September 11th effect, which definitely changed people's lives. Do you feel that that's the time when people started to really take a lot more notice about the dangers that surround them? Not that you haven't had those throughout the years, Frank, but September 11th, in my opinion, was the biggest wake-up call in American history outside of the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And that's when I got into business. And you know what? You don't know what's going to happen to you. And all of a sudden, our life isn't safe anymore. What do you think is happening at the airports with Homeland Security and everything? And I hate to say that September 11th put the alarm business on the map, but I think that's a safe assertion, isn't it?
Well, it definitely made people realize that, hey, I'm vulnerable. We've never felt vulnerable before. We've never been attacked on our own soil. And, we had over 3,000 people die in one day as a result of just a few people. And people became very aware that there was threats out there that can impact their family, and they're like, man, I got to do something.
Right.
And so a lot of them, absolutely, a lot of them became way more aware of the threat that was in the world, and they said, hey, I'm going to do this just to protect my family, because that's all I can do.
Right.
I want to feel like I've done everything I can to keep my family safe. And absolutely, people became much more aware, and more people in that, especially in the years following that 9/11, definitely took advantage of the systems. And now, at that point, I'd say before that point, before 9/11, it was more of a luxury.
Right.
A lot of people saw it as a luxury, and afterward, it was more of a necessity. They saw this as, I really need to have this. And that was the big paradigm shift. Is it's not a luxury. I got to get this. I need this to protect my family. And that's the way people began to look at it. And I think that's where we're at today. People see it as one of the things that you just have to have.
Precisely my point. Now, I just want to talk about this a little bit in terms of marketing, okay? I know a lot of times people will look at signs as a way to contact companies. That's a common practice of advertising. I know nowadays individuals are skeptical with guys going door to door, but that's just reality that sometimes individuals in your industry depend on going door to door. They have to look at the crime list in order to have an understanding about where the trends are. So, do you find that you still do a lot of conventional door-to-door approaches, even though nowadays you have to be a bit more careful? And I know nowadays with the internet and so forth, there's other ways to make sure that consumers have access to what you do, because we can't get away from it. There's a lot of people that are very concerned about going to the door. They'll go to high crime areas. I mean, those are certainly public record, and new homeowners list. So let's just talk a little bit about that so that people understand about to be a little bit careful out there, but understand that, what types of caution or tips that you should be aware of, and how you guys go about staying busy.
Well, we have a lot of access to data these days, and here in Orlando, the Orlando Police Department has an active police calls that's displayed in real time. So you can go on their active police calls webpage, and it'll show you exactly who's doing what right now, and it'll say residential burglary. And when we see that, our guys will absolutely go to that neighborhood and talk to the people in that neighborhood, because they absolutely cannot undo anything that's been done. They cannot undo the burglary that's already happened. But what they can do is help prevent other people in the neighborhood from becoming a victim. And as well as I do, Scott, from your time in this, that you will see certain criminal elements like to feed on the same neighborhood, the same area. If they have success in an area, they'll continue to go back there. And so we absolutely will send guys into a neighborhood where there's been a victim in an attempt to offer them a lower rate, a special promotion, let's say, to help make sure that those guys don't get a foothold in that neighborhood, and there aren't other victims in that neighborhood when we can help them to not become a victim.
Well, I know new homeowners lists are a very effective way to approach people. Let's face the reality. They don't know what they're getting into. You buy a home because you love the square footage, the area, but let's not kid ourselves. Nobody's exempt from a potential situation. Better be proactive instead of reactive, as we've known in this society. So, I mean, to me, those are just common things that people have to be aware of, that, again, it's all about proactivity versus reactivity is really what it is. So regardless of how you come across your clients, to me, it's important. So who do you trust when they come to the door, Frank? I mean, I'm not going to sit here and let anybody else in there. They got to have a badge. They have to have some. And do you find yourself at times with vans of supervisors out there to make sure that everybody is square? Because I think it's important that people understand who they're working with.
Well, I will tell you, Scott, this is a real kind of pet peeve for me, but absolutely, you should never, ever, ever allow any kind of a salesperson into your home that's not absolutely registered with the state. And in the alarm business, we all get a registration in this particular case from the Alarm Association of Florida. We means we've been criminally background checked. We've been fingerprinted. They've run us through an FBI background check. We're not a criminal. And so they know absolutely if we've got that around our neck and we can show it to them that we're not a danger to them. Now, I can tell you that not everyone does that because it costs money. And it costs us money to do that background check and to put people through that process, and it's expensive. And there's companies out there that will send reps out into the field that do not do that, and they don't know these guys from Adam. And, you know, you probably remember just a few years ago that there was a young man on a van program for an ADT dealer that raped a young lady in Tampa. And ultimately they found out they had never background checked this guy at all. You know, and of course that ADT dealer kind of self-imploded at that point. They lost their license. They went out of business. And but we want to do things the right way. We do things the right way. So every one of our people has a badge with a license. It's every state that they're in, and they're more than willing to show it to you. And I would tell you, if they don't have it, don't let them in.
Right. Well, it doesn't take a whole lot to go on social media to know what companies are reputable versus they aren't. For sure, because nowadays, you know, we're talking about an instantaneous news cycle without a doubt. So you definitely have to do that to safeguard yourself against any type of situations like that. Now, I know not everybody can get a alarm system. I know that there are times when you have a lower credit score, but do you find that even some of the individuals that are high risk are still able to have access to these systems? Have the programs changed enough to accommodate some of those individuals?
Well, absolutely. I mean, there was a time, and you're well aware of this, that, you know, you needed to have really pretty good credit. And, you know, you had to be a homeowner. And, you know, there were some definitive criteria for you to even qualify to get a system. And, you know, and we at that time, we alienated a good segment of the population, and we did not take care of them, and they wanted to safeguard their families just as much as anyone else. But we, you know, as times have gone by, we've evolved, and so we have programs for people that rent, you know. And I mean, I could tell you, you know, my daughter lived in Miami, and her fiance were rented. They both had 700 credit scores. They were renting a $2,200 a month apartment. I mean, they were an ideal client. But yet, at one point in time, we wouldn't have touched them because they didn't own the home. And that's no longer the case. So we definitely have programs for people with less than perfect credit. We go all the way down to 500 credit score now. We've got programs for people that are renters. We've got programs for homeowners. So, I mean, it's all inclusive. We have a program. If you want to protect your family, we have a solution, I guarantee you.
All right, and we'll close this broadcast before we get to contact information. Are there any other tips that you feel that the consumers should have out there? I know we've touched on a lot of important subjects, but they're very necessary in a society that definitely, you know, right now we're in a very vulnerable situation, so it's important that we don't leave any stones unturned. But are there any other tips that we haven't discussed in this broadcast, Frank, that the average consumer should know about?
Well, I mean, I would tell you that I think probably one of the most important things you can do is get a doorbell camera and not open the door if you don't know who's there. You know, a lot of times people would go to the door, somebody rang the doorbell, knock the door, and you open yourself up and you have no idea who's there. Get a doorbell camera where you can see it from inside the home. You can see it right on your phone. If you don't know who that is, don't open the door. Don't put yourself in a compromised position where you're no longer safe when there's some technology that can prevent that from happening. You can look on that. Hey, I don't know who that is. I'm not opening the door at 10 o'clock at night for some stranger. Right. And just be smart, guys. There's technology out there that'll help you safeguard yourself and your family. Take advantage of it, you know.
And I should point out, folks, that not only do you run across individuals that are able to have access, you know, where they go door to door, but nowadays you can book appointments online too, right, Frank? Through your company as well. I think a lot more online appointments are readily available through technology. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So, like I mentioned before, we do Skype, we do FaceTime, we do uh, uh, Google Hangouts, we do the Zoom call like we're doing right now. So we have a lot of different technologies, whatever the customer may be comfortable with, for us to be able to go through the process, just like you and I are doing. We're hundreds of miles apart, but we're sitting here watching each other, talking to each other, and we can do the same thing, doing a walkthrough in your home and design the system that's going to meet your needs and get your family protected, just like that.
Just like old times. We'll be getting together soon enough. Me, I'm not shy when it comes to driving by any stretch of the imagination. Okay, with that said, Frank Chaput, I want you to let everybody know out there how they can get a hold of you.
All right. Once again, I'm Frank Chaput with Power Home Technologies, and you can give me a call at 407-394-2531, or you can reach out to me via email at fchaput@pht.com.
Very good. And as far as we're concerned, if you want to listen to the audio version of No Limits, I'll give you ways to do it. You can go through Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. If I've spoken too fast, it won't be the first time I've heard it, won't be the last time I've heard it. So I'll give you an audio replay or a visual, depending if you're looking the other ways. Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Other ways to get a hold of us. You can follow us on Twitter at Tribune South. That's at Tribune South. Facebook and Instagram, South Florida Tribune Gets It Done. You are watching to No Limits here via our YouTube channel. So please subscribe to the YouTube channel and go out there and share this broadcast. Nobody's going to sit here and tell me this one isn't useful, especially since Christmas is right around the corner. And the sooner it gets here, the sooner we get rid of 2020 to begin with. But if you don't have a notepad and a pen and paper, shame on you, as Girl Pile would say, shame, shame, shame. So again, subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. As far as our website's concerned, www.southfloridatribune.com gets it done. We have a section out there for a Motor City Monitor, which allows us to have a lot of the Detroit things, since it's from my hometown. We have media distribution partners as well that contribute, as well as our columnists and all of our broadcasts there. I should point out the advantages of subscribing to the YouTube channel are the fact that you get to watch a sports exchange, No Limits, which we're doing right now, 108 Stitches Baseball Talk, Real and the Rare, Fantasy Football, South Florida Tribune Podcast, which preceded this broadcast. Our email is southfloridatribune@gmail.com. If you have any suggestions for broadcasts, you want to get a hold of Frank Chaput that way, feel free to do so. And LinkedIn, Scott Morganroth Gets It Done. So there's lots of ways to go out there and reach us. And, again, it's been a great reunion with Frank Chaput. And all I can tell you, Frank, I'm looking forward to having this broadcast. The security business is something I have a very strong affection for. I was in it for a long time. I feel a part of me still is in it. And it's something that you never get rid of. And every time we have an opportunity to get together and talk about this, folks, don't take this lightly, okay? This is not a society that you can just sit there and let anybody in anymore. You've got to be careful. And these systems are multidimensional, folks. They cover alarm systems to protect against theft. You have fire, and you also have the medical. Don't take it for granted. So, once again, we want to thank you for joining us on this edition of No Limits. My name is Scott Morganroth, and once again, I'm very pleased to be joined by Frank Chaput tonight. And we hope that everybody out there takes the necessary precautions that they have to do. Social distance, mask up, be safe out there, and do the right things, because unfortunately, it doesn't look like this pandemic's getting any easier. And as much as we'd like to think there's perception and there's reality. So don't take it for granted. Don't take anything for granted with what I did before, and I feel strong about what Frank Chaput has done a marvelous job entertaining. Once again, make sure when you watch this broadcast or listen to it, have a notepad and a pen and a couple of pens, or even a number 2 pencil will work. So on behalf of Frank Chaput, my name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of No Limits. Good night, everybody.